Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This time we're going to be doing something a little different. I've put together a short documentary about Disney's time owning Star Wars. Hope you enjoy. A long time ago, in a galaxy that hits close to home, the year was 2012. George Lucas made the fateful decision to sell Star Wars to Disney to the tune of $4 billion. I remembered at the time there was a lot of uncertainty in response to this move, and understandably so, but yet a sense of optimism remained that under the mega corporate umbrella of Disney, that we would get new and exciting projects. Unfortunately, it was not long after this transaction was made that we would begin to see the signs of demise for the franchise early on. Kathleen Kennedy was named as the president of Lucasfilm, someone that Lucas personally trusted would oversee his vision for the franchise going forward. People speculate that the reason George sold had a lot to do with the criticism he received for the prequel trilogy, but it doesn't appear that it really played a huge role in his decision. The man was getting older, wanting to spend time with his family, but he wanted to see his franchise continue while being able to watch from the sidelines. I don't fault the man for choosing to move on with his life, but I wish there had been an heir apparent inside of Lucasfilm that could have continued the franchise without the interference of a big corporation like Disney. In retrospect, this, in my opinion, was a mistake. Early on, we got a taste of what the Disney Star Wars agenda would be about. Shortly after their acquisition, they made the announcement that all expanded universe stories would be officially deemed non canon and would no longer continue. All authorized Star Wars projects going forward would be considered part of the Disney Star Wars canon and would have to fit within the confines of the universe they were building. I still vividly remember my personal reaction to this news. While I understand that even George Lucas didn't necessarily consider these stories canon, I was more upset that all of these fantastic authors and creators that had added so much to the Star Wars franchise, that they would no longer be able to contribute. I feel like there's a way they could have separated these stories from the larger canon while still allowing them to continue being written. It really sucks. Honestly, this felt like a power move, with Disney wanting control of everything using the Star Wars name. Despite their promise to create a new expanded universe of stories to supplement their multimedia projects, we now know that they never even came close to reaching the same level of quality that some of the expanded universe stories did. And perhaps the most damning statement was made by Kathleen Kennedy herself. We don't have source material. We don't have comic books. We don't have 800-page novels. We don't have anything other than passionate storytellers who get together and talk about what the next iteration might be. Hmm, right. Now, let's not forget that George Lucas himself handed over story treatments for the Star Wars sequel trilogy at the time of sale, and was misled to believe that these treatments would be adapted into the next three films of the Skywalker saga. Bob Iger himself confirmed this in his book, where he expresses regret over how those conversations with George were handled. What a shame. But that leads us into Disney's first major move with the Star Wars brand, the sequel trilogy. When Disney announced that they would be making a brand new Star Wars trilogy, bringing back the classic fan favorite characters from the original trilogy, there was a level of cautious optimism for the fandom. We would be getting our first new Star Wars movie in a decade, and with the announcement of The Force Awakens, I remember all of the hype around Star Wars at this time: new characters, new stories, fan favorites like Luke Skywalker, Princess Leia, Han Solo, all coming back to the big screen. Marketing was everywhere, from toys to posters, and this could honestly be considered the highest point of the franchise during the Disney era. Little did we know that it would be all downhill from here. The Force Awakens would release in 2015, and honestly wasn't that bad at the time. J.J. Abrams was brought in to helm the first installment of the trilogy, with Ryan Johnson and Colin Trevorrow taking over for the following episodes, respectively. This wasn't completely known at the time, but the decision to create a cohesive trilogy with three totally different visionaries controlling the direction of the saga, with no planned out storyline, was an absolute mistake. Abrams created his movie with his infamous mystery box aspect, setting up several mysterious questions about the characters and their backstories that are set up in a way in which they will be answered in the next films. Spoiler, they aren't. At least, not in a way that's anywhere near satisfying. Starting off on the wrong foot, the choice was made to sideline the OG heroes in favor of the new cast. Han Solo turned into a deadbeat dad, with he and Leia no longer together. Luke Skywalker nowhere to be found until the very last shot of the film. And probably most damning, qualities of this film lacked originality, with the First Order and Resistance essentially being reskins of the Rebels and the Empire. But this was only the beginning. After The Force Awakens, the next few years were filled with theories and intrigue about what direction Rian Johnson's Episode 8 would take the franchise. Fans were excited because this would finally be the film where we would start to see Luke Skywalker back in action, with this movie picking up directly after the cliffhanger from the previous film. Well, in December of 2017, we would finally get our answers, and to this day, many consider this the film that broke the Star Wars fanbase. Rian Johnson wanted to subvert expectations and make this movie his own without really being tied to an overarching plan or story. Many of the plot lines from the previous movie were abandoned or answered in the most vague, unsatisfying ways possible. Rey's parents were nobodies. Luke went into hiding because he almost killed his nephew in a moment of absolutely out of character weakness. Snoke, set to be the main antagonist of the trilogy, was killed off halfway through the movie with little to no payoff or backstory given. Finn is relegated to side quests. This movie feels so tonally different from The Force Awakens that it is jarring, and the character assassination performed on Luke Skywalker is unforgivable in my opinion. Rian Johnson shows such an arrogant misunderstanding of Star Wars that it absolutely blows my mind how much this man was praised by Disney. Before The Last Jedi even hit theaters, it was announced by Lucasfilm that Johnson would be helming a Star Wars trilogy of his own creation. But alas, all these years later, that trilogy still hasn't seen the light of day, and likely never will. Optimism for Star Wars Episode 9 was nowhere near as high as it had been for the previous installments. When fans voiced their displeasure with The Last Jedi, the executives at Disney doubled down and started attacking the fans for their opinions, with even Rian Johnson saying that he made The Last Jedi for himself, not for the fans. With many of the trilogy's storylines now altered, and not having a clear cut villain with the death of Supreme Leader Snoke, Colin Trevorrow would be fired from the project for creative differences, and J.J. Abrams would return to finish the trilogy he started. Despite a fantastic trailer that honestly did ignite a bit of excitement in the fanbase at the time, The decision to bring Palpatine back from the dead would prove to be one of the final crucial pieces of evidence that the executives and creatives at Lucasfilm truly had no idea what they were doing. The Rise of Skywalker was a mess, with a plot moving at the speed of light and any meaningful exposition being cast aside. There were moments in this movie that felt like direct jabs towards the decisions Ryan Johnson made with Episode 8, with retcons about Rey's parents and trying to fix Luke Skywalker as a Force ghost, but it was too little too late. The Star Wars sequel trilogy would end with a whimper, not the grand finale it should have been from the start. In fact, this would mark the end of Star Wars movies for the next 6 years, with the focus instead shifting to the Disney Plus streaming platform, with live action and animated shows. Let's talk about how that would turn out. It's worth mentioning that two standalone films were released during the time of the sequel trilogy. Rogue One, which had its director replaced halfway through the project, would be considered a decent film by most fans. And then there's Solo, a Star Wars story, which lost money for Lucasfilm at the box office and had more than a few elements working against it. It also had a change in creative leadership deep into the project and had to be salvaged by Ron Howard. It also released just a few months after the PR nightmare that was The Last Jedi. And honestly, this was not a film that anyone really asked for. Wasn't necessarily a bad film, but just kinda there. Because of the financial failure of Solo, future planned standalone movies for Obi-Wan Kenobi and Boba Fett were scrapped and repurposed into live action series for those characters. So let's talk about Disney Plus, the streaming platform launched by Disney. Kicking things off with The Mandalorian, this brought about a new wave of hope for Star Wars. The first two seasons of that show were incredible, loved by most fans obsessed with the introduction of Grogu, aka Baby Yoda, who sent a massive wave of merchandise sales throughout Lucasfilm. In addition, the first couple seasons of that show really showed a deep appreciation and understanding of the franchise's lore. They even brought back Luke Skywalker in his prime, a moment considered by many to be the best Star Wars moment created in the Disney era. Season 3 would regress, however, and the hype around the show would die down significantly. Book of Boba Fett would suffer from the title character's change in characterization and a borderline boring plot. Obi-Wan Kenobi looked cheap, and while it had good moments and good performances from Ewan McGregor and Hayden Christensen, the plot left a lot to be desired. Ahsoka would suffer from pacing issues and a few lackluster performances. Andor would be divisive in its own way, being a different type of Star Wars, much different than the other content offered on the platform. The animated shows would maintain consistent quality for the most part, being some of the best content offered on Disney Plus to date. And then The Acolyte happened. For anyone on the fence about the direction Star Wars had gone under Disney, The Acolyte might have been the deciding factor for many fans to abandon ship entirely. Similar to The Last Jedi, this was a project that played very loosely with the lore, and did so with an arrogance. Some of the acting in the show was downright awful, the plot made very little sense, and at times it felt disrespectful to the franchise it was supposed to represent. Combine this with comments made by showrunner Leslie Headland, and fans were absolutely not going to accept this project. It's important to hold studios accountable for their products. People spend good money on Disney Plus subscriptions, merchandise, and more, and we have to hold them to a high standard of quality. Otherwise, they won't care. In a rare moment of reading the room, it was announced that The Acolyte will not be renewed for a second season. The viewership numbers failed to justify the project's insane budget, and many fans are now totally done with Disney Star Wars. The show following The Acolyte, Skeleton Crew, also failed to bring in decent viewership, likely due to backlash and fallout from The Acolyte. So, where do we go from here? The truth is, not every single thing Disney has produced has been awful. There are new movies coming in the future, but unless Kathleen Kennedy and the creatives at Lucasfilm have learned from their mistakes, start listening to the fan base instead of making excuses and doubling down, it's only going to be more of the same. Stop announcing projects that will never see the light of day. Stop hiring the wrong people and then have to change the direction of the project halfway through. The good news in all of this, however, is that the original trilogy, the prequel trilogy, and all of the expanded universe content still exists for us to enjoy, and the legacy of what got us into Star Wars in the first place can never be taken from us, no matter what Disney does. That's going to be all I got for you this time. I appreciate you watching the video. If you're a fan or want to see more content from the channel, please hit that subscribe button. And as always, may the force be with you. Now let's blow up that like button and go home.